In today's show, I'm going to be looking back at the top 20 players for fantasy basketball over the last 2 weeks. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Like we do at this time every week, I'm looking back at the top 20 players for category leagues, the top 20 players for points leagues, over the last 2 weeks of action on a per-game basis. Let's start with category leagues, and at number 1, Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic is the 11th ranked player over the course of the season, but over the last 5 games, he's averaging 30, 13, and 10. As weird as it is to say about Luka Doncic, I think it might be a sell-high moment, and I'll tell you why. Can he average 30, 13, and 10? Sure, no worries. Can he do it while shooting 48 and 74% with 36% from 3? Of course he can. But he's averaging 1.6 blocks and 1.4 steals. That's what's pushed him from being that guy that in that 6 to 9 range is where I would have probably drafted him versus the guy here who's at number 1. You'll be able to find plenty of people who want him for number 1 overall value. Would anyone trade Nikola Jokic for him? Maybe. Could you get James Harden plus for him? Maybe. That's what I'd be probably looking to do. But just remember that this value, while it's awesome, is propped up by 1.6 blocks, which is not a number for Luka Doncic. It's going to be able to continue. Number 2 is Brad Beal, who's averaging 39 points in the last 5, 6 assists, 6 rebounds, 1 steal, 53 and 86. Realistically, it's just massive scoring that's putting Beal this high. He is the 4th overall player over the course of the season, and he probably can be a top 10 guy, especially with Russell Westbrook being terrible for the rest of the year. So Beal at number 2. Then at number 3, it's Big Chungus, Nikola Jokic. Over the last 8 games, he's averaging 24, 11, and 9 with 2 steals on 55 and 86. Those steals will drop, but his blocks have already come down. He's the number 1 player this year. And yeah, will he continue to be a top 5 guy? Maybe. Probably. He looks pretty bloody good at this point, and he is dishing, and they've changed their offense a little bit, so he's just running absolutely everything in terms of assists. Number 4 is the Beetle, Paul George, who is the 6th ranked player over the course of the year, 4th over the last 2 weeks, averaging 28 points, doing it on 55% three-point shooting, so probably going to be some level of drop-off there, but George was one of the biggest steals at draft time and looks even better in hindsight. At number 5 is Kyrie Irving. He's only played 3 games, but they were really good games. 26, 7, and 6 with over 2 steals on 47%. I think he's going to drop off when he eventually returns because he will probably be the 3rd offensive option with KD and Harden there, and he's not going to be able to maintain top 10 numbers, which he's been. He's the 3rd ranked player this year, and as I said, 5th here over the last 2 weeks. At number 6, it's Zach LaVine, whose last 6 games have been amazing. 31 points a game on 65 true shooting, averaging 6 rebounds and 5 assists and 4 threes and a steal. The only thing I look at there with LaVine and say, well, maybe not, is 53% shooting, which includes 61% on 2s. He's shooting 42% on 3s. Maybe that's real. I'm just not convinced that 61% on 2s are. I think he's a lock for a top 20 finish for this season. Well, maybe not a lock, but that's what I'd be putting my money on with Zach LaVine. Joel Embiid is your 7th ranked player over the last 2 weeks, your 7th ranked player over the course of the season, and that includes Thursday's absolute turd burger against the Heat. He is averaging 24 and 11 in under 31 minutes a night. 1.7 steals, 1.4 blocks, 54 and 86. He's just really good, and I don't really have much more to say. Nor do I with Karl Anthony Towns, who roared back in his 2 games, 25 and 14, with 2.5 blocks on 50 and 93. Didn't get a steal and only hit 1.5 threes, so there is plenty of room for him to improve from there. At number 9, it's KD, Kevin Durant, 36 minutes a night, 30 points per game, 8.5 rebounds, 6.8 assists, a block, stellar percentages. We know how good KD is. He's probably going to suffer somewhat of a hit. I doubt he averages 30 when Kyrie and Harden are both playing, but he's still going to be good and probably can be close to a top 12 to top 15 player. Number 10 is Malcolm Brogdon. 39 minutes, 25 points, 8 assists, 2 steals. The 2 steals is what really stands out. That is a guy that averaging under 1 steal a game for about 3 or 4 years. There is going to be some regression there. The shooting, though, he's an excellent shooter. The usage is nice. The minutes are astronomical, and I don't think Bjorkgren's really changing that anytime soon, unfortunately. Let's hope that Brogdon, a guy that's been susceptible to injuries in his career, can keep going. He is the 16th ranked player. I would be inclined to trade him for a top 20 guy. I worry significantly about his injuries. Number 11 is Damian Lillard, who's starting to come good now, averaging 29 and 7 with over 4 threes and 46 and 93 is his percentages. His shooting was off to begin the year. It's starting to come along now, which is obviously pretty good news if you drafted Lillard high in that, again, 6 to 9 range, which was probably the right spot to grab him. I think he'll finish in that top 10 when all is said and done, and he's working his way towards there at the moment, which is great because it was a rough start. It was also a rough start for Anthony Davis, who now is the 12th ranked guy over the last 2 weeks. He's averaging 2.5 blocks in his last 7 games, including 23 and 9 points and rebounds, and a true shooting of 65%, and that's while shooting under 77 from the line. He's a better free throw shooter than that. Number 13 and number 14 are 2 teammates. Jaylen Brown at 13, Jason Tatum at 14. We haven't seen much of the Celtics over the last few days, but those guys are putting up great numbers. Brown shooting hasn't missed a free throw in the last 5 games, and he's at 58% from 2. There is going to be some level of regression from both of these guys in terms of a little bit of a usage hit when Kemba's back, but also an efficiency hit for Jaylen Brown in particular with his 2-pointers. Tatum is at 30 and 6. A block, 4.5 boards, 50 and 91. He's been awesome as well. Number 15 is Steph Curry, averaging 29 points with 6 assists on 46 and 90. He can be better than this. He is the 8th ranked player this season, so 15th over the last 2 weeks is a little bit of a downer. It's mainly because, he's just not quite there. Those steals are a bit low. He hasn't blocked a shot. And there's a whole bunch of guys over him who are just producing at an astonishingly high level, and that will normalize to some degree. Number 16, the Wiki, Chris Boucher, 26 minutes a night over the last 2 weeks, 18 points. So why is he so high? Over 2 threes, 7 boards, 2.6 blocks, 1 steal, 61% from the field and 84% from the line. His true shooting is 76%. Anyone want to take a guess at what Boucher's best fantasy category is over this time? It's blocks, and then it's field goal percentage. And for a guy that's hitting over 2 threes a game, to still have 61% shooting is huge. Now, he's hitting 50% of his threes. That's going to come down, but his 2-pointers at 69%.
Giggity.
Maybe that doesn't come down. He's been awesome. He's a top 50 guy, I would say, almost guaranteed the rest of the year. Probably even higher, to be honest. Is he a sell high? Maybe, but no one's going to give you top 35 value for Boucher, so I'd be just inclined to hold on. 17, Nikola Vucevic of the Orlando Magic. He is the 17th ranked player, averaging 25 and 11. Maybe a bit of a sell high because he's getting a real usage spike with Evan Fournier out. Fournier will come back and take some of those shots away, but he is roasting it. While CJ McCollum, we thought that he'd drop off somewhat. He has a little bit here, down to be the 18th ranked player. The steal numbers and the assist numbers, especially the assists, were sky high. They're down under 5 again now. And the free throws, which are like 92% or something, they've come down to 81% and starting to normalize. Maybe he can be a top 30 player. Maybe he's a top 40 player the rest of the way, but not that top 10 guy that he was for that stretch of time. Number 19 is the fun guy.
I'm a fun guy.
Kawhi Leonard, rock solid sort of stuff. 25, 5 and 6, 1.6 steals, 47, 84, 48% from 3, so that's some really good 3-point shooting. And then number 20 is Chrissy Middleton, averaging 21 points in 32 minutes, 5 assists, 6 rebounds, shooting an astonishing 69% true shooting.
Giggity.
With 58% from the field overall. The next 4 guys out of the top 20 were Seth Curry, Tyrese Halliburton, amazingly. If I can find the right button, I'll hit it.
What?
Yep, Tyrese Halliburton at number 22 over the last 2 weeks. Gordie Hayward at 23 and Miles Turner at number 24. Let's now have a look at top 20 in points leagues. Standard, Yahoo, points leagues. The top 3, amazingly, are exactly the same in categories. Luka Doncic, Bradley Beal, Nikola Jokic. They're your top 3. Number 4 is a bloke that didn't even crack in to that top 20 in category leagues. Actually, if I tell you where this guy was, I'll play his name.
Giannis Antetokounmpo.
He's 31 in category leagues, 4th in points leagues, averaging 52 fantasy points. Luka's averaging 64 over the last 5 games. Pretty massive numbers there. Number 5 is Karl Anthony Towns, who's averaging 52 fantasy points since he returned. And there's your top 5 for points leagues. At number 6, it's Kyrie Irving, averaging 50 fantasy points. I think that's going to come down to probably low 40s in this trade, so be aware of that. Number 7 is Kevin Durant. He's averaging 50 as well. That'll probably come down to mid-40s. Number 8 is Joel Embiid, averaging 48. I think he can be a little bit better than that, so he can push up to be a top 5 to top 7 player in points leagues. And then number 9 is Malcolm Brogdon, who's averaging almost 48 fantasy points per game over his last 7. I think there is some drop-off coming there for Brogdon, but probably a top 30 guy for the rest of the way. A big sell-high opportunity. Number 10 is Paul George, who's averaging 48 fantasy points over these last 2 weeks, and there's your top 10. At number 11, it's Zach LaVine on a real hot streak here, LaVine, so there is going to be some regression from him. Number 12, Anthony Davis. Very, very similar, weirdly, the points and categories rankings this time. They're not normally this similar. Anthony Davis at 12, Jason Tatum at 13, Nikola Vucevic at 14, and then LeBron James at number 15.
LeBron James.
In category leagues, LeBron is at number 29. In points leagues, he is at number 15, averaging 46.5 fantasy points per game, which is a little bit up on the 45 he's averaging over the course of the season. I think he can still get better than that and probably push into the top 10 for the rest of the year. So maybe it's a little bit of a buy low on LeBron James. At number 16, Damian Lillard is giving us 46 fantasy points per game. I think that's probably about his area. He's much worse in points leagues than he's in category leagues. Number 17 is Kawhi Leonard, who's at 46 per game, which again is pretty similar to his rest of season outlook. Steph Curry at number 18. Domantas Sabonis at number 19. Again, this is probably the right spot for Domantas, who is actually the 13th ranked player over the course of the year. And then the last spot in the top 20 goes to the double royal. Julius Randle over that time frame's averaging 22, 11, and 6.5 in 37 minutes, which is 45 fantasy points. I think, again, this is probably his area. That 17 to 25 type range is where Randle sits. Just outside the top 20 for points leagues, you've got McCollum at 21, Ingram at 22, Jaylen Brown at 23, and Russell Westbrook at 24. So there are your top 20 players in category leagues for the last 2 weeks, your top 20 players in points leagues for the last 2 weeks. Guys, subscribe Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on YouTube. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.